I went to university for 3 weeks. On my first day, I walked in to collect my lanyard. They said, put on a pronoun badge. I said, no. I was in halls of residence. I had people actually outside my door in the corridor waiting for me to come out my room just so they could attack me. I had people sending me knife emojis saying, we're coming for you.
Hi, my name's Emma Dunwell. Welcome to the Resistance Podcast. I'm here with 19-year-old Montgomery Toms, who is one of the few young people in the freedom movement fighting against global agendas and has gained quite a large following on social media. So would you like to introduce yourself for those who might not know who you are?
Yeah, so my name's Montgomery, Monty, a bit more informal. My main aim is involving younger people in pushing back against mainstream narratives, pushing back against government. Global authoritarianism is my main kind of concern. Farmers demo recently, that was absolutely brilliant, and that was a wake up point for me, if you like, because for me, I integrated myself into demonstrating and into the freedom movement, if you like, at a point where lockdown started to calm down, at the point where the severity of the situation it reduced dramatically. So because of that, I didn't get the opportunity to kind of properly integrate by grabbing a megaphone and making some sort of an impact. And at the farmers demo, of course, that was a collection of thousands and thousands of people. You were there, weren't you?
Yeah. I did a few interviews myself. Really enjoyable.
Yeah. So that to get that level of people in one place at one time is incredibly hard, and it takes something. It takes something to happen. You can't try and manufacture that. And I have tried to get people back onto the street, and unless there is something actually happening that's scaring people aren't going to come together. And I took that as an opportunity to spread a wider message, because I feel that we're at a point where we're sort of stagnated in many ways, and the farmer situation is an opportunity to integrate with another demographic, because the farmers protest was great. And I do think that it was needed, and I do think that the speeches were worth listening to, but I don't think that they latched onto the bigger picture, and I don't think they took advantage of what they had managed to create. And then when I was at the farmers demo, I grabbed a megaphone and everyone was starting to go home. I took it as an opportunity to start a chant, to start some sort of collective energy, but amongst normal people. It's all well and good having people on a stage, I get that, but having ordinary people getting involved and actually showing that they have power and showing that they have authority to govern themselves and can push back against authoritarianism, especially from our government, is very, very powerful. So we did really well with that. And one of the things I was trying to promote was talking about Agenda 2030, talking about the Great Reset, talking about net zero policies, which are directly harming people. And if we don't broaden our horizons, and if we don't actually divulge the really concerning and sinister agenda behind the attack on the farmers, then we're not going to get anywhere. And at least that's my opinion. And I thought maybe I'd be a lone voice, but clearly a lot of farmers, or the people attending the farmers demo, agreed. So that's regarding the farmers. And then just to link back to kind of who I am. So lockdown hit when I was 14, and when it hit, it was clear that obviously something was afoot. I didn't know what it was. I didn't understand. I was 14, but I had the influence from both my mum and my dad, who one of them is a psychologist, one of them is a philosopher by kind of master's degree, but also very scientifically minded as well. So having that combination of psychology, science, and kind of morals, ethics, and philosophy was sort of the perfect combination to awaken me to some sort of very, very concerning agenda that was happening. By the time I was 16 and I'd fought back within the education system relentlessly against all the lockdown mandates and against the masks and all of that ridiculous all those ridiculous rules that they put into the education system, I then started to kind of scratch beneath the surface a bit more and look at, well, why has this actually happened? And people used to ask me, they'd say, you're standing against the masks, you're standing against the jab, you're standing against all of these COVID mandates, but if it's so obviously stupid, why are people coming up with this idea? Why are people driving these concepts? And it got me thinking, well, yeah, why? What is the actual reason? Surely it's so obvious that this is wrong. So there must be something out there that's happening that I've not quite worked out yet. And that's when I started looking into United Nations, the World Economic Forum, looking at kind of global organizations that are influencing our politics, looking at Bill Gates, looking at Klaus Schwab, looking at just a conglomerate of absolute psychopaths who are looking to hijack democracy and steer it in a really, really concerning direction. So at that point, I was like, right, I don't feel comfortable not doing something here. I don't feel comfortable just knowing that this is happening, but not at least trying to make some sort of an impact. So I started coming to London, attending the demos, attending the anti-lockdown demos, and I was just coming every single week, getting a train into London. I grew up outside of London, and that triggered kind of an obsession, if you like, but maybe that sounds a bit unhealthy, but less of an obsession, more of a passion and more of a drive. And what I continued doing is growing a social media. I started to realize that I could capitalize on social media, and as much as I think it is gross and as much as I think that it is a tool that has been used for bad, I wanted to change that to some extent and use it as an opportunity to get young people involved, because of course young people are on social media. I speak a lot about Agenda 2030, as I mentioned, the Great Reset, cashless society, the mainstream media, about obviously working with Resistance GB. You obviously know a lot about mainstream media, so that's a good one to try and break through, especially to young people. And young people are waking up and young people are getting involved. I've got a team of young people that are going to start doing outreach about these issues with me. I've got all sorts of plans coming up, and it is kind of in this moment things are exponentially growing on my part to try and involve the youth and actually make even more of an impact when it comes to raising awareness about the concerning issues that are happening that the mainstream media will not talk about.
So I suppose the main thing that sets you apart from everyone else in the freedom movement is your age. Obviously, you're 19. You kind of woke up to this stuff between the ages of 14 to 16. I myself, I'm 20, but I'm from the countryside, so no one was really talking about this where I'm from. They still don't. None of my family is really aware to this. I suppose the only reason why I got into it is because my mom was somewhat of a conspiracy theorist. What would you say, other than maybe where they live or how prevalent something is where they are, what would you say is the main reason that people in our generation aren't looking at these things?
Well, the education system is a tool. It's a very, very useful tool. It's a sickening tool, and it's been hijacked for a very, very long time now. And it's J.D. Rockefeller who's quite rightly predicted, or you could say manufactured, an education system which was for a nation of workers, not thinkers. And that's a direct quote from him. And I think that still is translating to the 21st century. And we've got within the education system young people that are being permanently subjected to propaganda and are terrified to speak up because the repercussions are so severe. I spoke up just to say I didn't want to wear a face nappy on my face, and in return I got isolated by my cohort, I got attacked, got vilified. I had teachers even making up lies about me wearing them when I wasn't wearing them. I was told I was going to be put in isolation. I was told I had to sit in the behavioural management office if I didn't wear a lanyard to say I was exempt. You know, the repercussions are really severe. I then was lonely, obviously. But all of these things I don't really care about, because at the time I was really, really, passionate and standing for truth. And that is ultimately what I encourage tremendously within our generation. We do share the same generation. We're both aware, we must be aware of how unimpressed we are by the lack of passion and interest that our generation have in anything. It's not just about politics. At least our generation could take an interest in something, and not just surface level TikTok or football or the pub or just their 9-to-5 job. One thing I have said in every single interview I've ever done and publicly on my social media is the problem with our generation. It's not about the fact that they have the wrong opinion. It's the fact they don't have an opinion. At least with a wrong opinion, you can have a debate, but they're not even willing to do that.
Yeah. And also, I think that at the moment we're living in a generation that thrives on instant gratification. If it's not something that they can get in a 10-second clip, they don't want to know. If they have to sit down, maybe watch a documentary, if they have to really go out, really dig for something, it's just not interesting unless it's in your face, it's colourful, it's funny, or whatever else. In the education system, there is a lot of pushback, and there's a lot of indoctrination, especially obviously the most prevalent one at the moment is the environment crisis and gender indoctrination. What would you say is there a worse thing that's happened to you? Have you ever had a brush up with the law because of any of this stuff? Because obviously I think a lot of people are scared about speaking out about this sort of stuff because a lot of people have had run-ins with the police because of it, political prisoners and so forth.
When I got involved in all of this, I was given some very good advice by some very, very good people who have most certainly been arrested several times for standing against lockdowns, and came forward and said, look, I can see that you're really pushing for this and I'm going to support you in every way possible, but here's some tips and tricks. We've learned the hard way. And I've not been involved in any legal issues yet. I don't think it's inevitable that I'm going to escape that forever. But as I said, I've been well protected in that regard. The worst repercussions I've ever faced, well, I would say an internal emotional struggle. Because I think that being awake, and people use this term and they thrive off it as if being awake is some sort of badge of honor. But actually the reality of being awake to certain things is it's actually miserable. It's isolating. It's low. It's very lonely. It can be a really depressing environment unless you sustain yourself and and involve yourself with other people that are like-minded, but then you get trapped into an echo chamber, and that's also a problem. So I think that the hardest thing that has affected me is being awake, because I've had to it's not complicated. Ignorance is bliss. It truly is. And when you understand what's actually happening in the world, and you understand the really sinister agendas attacking our generation specifically, and you're just watching it happen, and there's not much you can do unless you put a whole lot of effort into it. And that's when the mental toll comes in, because you're putting a whole lot of effort into fighting back, and in turn that doesn't help either. And I lost my youth. I never went clubbing. I never went partying. It's not something I particularly want to do. If I'm honest, it's not my thing, but I'm saying I never even got the choice. It's not something I ever wanted to involve myself in, but the choice was taken away from me. I never have traveled. That is over for me. I have lost some of the most valuable years of my life, all because I chose to put that to one side and say, look, I need to advocate for truth and freedom. So I suppose I actually don't know the repercussions. Maybe when I'm 30 years old, I'm going to look back on it. Maybe I'll regret it, but I got a feeling I won't.
See, I relate to so much of that, because while all my friends are off going on holidays and going shopping and everything like that, and I'm thinking about all these documentaries that I've watched that are just making me so worried for the future, worried for my children, possible grandchildren, and everything like that. And I think it really is that fear that makes it feel so isolating, because when you wake up to certain things, then you start looking around at everyone else and thinking, this is something that affects everyone, and yet not everyone is awake to it, and sometimes it's quite baffling.
Yeah.
So as well as generational difference being a thing in regards to people waking up to this, do you think that class could be a thing as well?
Well, one of the titles I get thrown at me all the time is "you're posh." And what I try and explain to people is, no, I'm not posh, actually. I just got taught to speak properly, and my dad gave me a clip around the back of the ear if I didn't pronounce my T's properly in a sentence. It's as simple as that. I don't think, just linking back to the education system, one thing the education system doesn't teach you to do is speak. We're not taught how to articulate ourselves. We're not taught how to explain ourselves, express ourselves, and put our ideas into words. And my dad and my mum, fortunately, taught me incredibly well how to express myself and articulate myself. And because of that, I have this weird sort of sweet spot, if you like, where I'm at a demo on a megaphone, and I'm looking like the kind of person who's a bit mad on a megaphone, but people are like, well, hang on a minute, what he's saying is actually all right. And I try and explain, like, my background. My mum and dad both come from really, really working class families, never had any money, both grew up in London, one in North, one in South. They're the first people in their family to go and get a proper education. They're the first people in the family to really go ahead and strive for something more. They wanted more for their children. They didn't want me to grow up in the same sort of environment. And because of that, in turn, I grew up in exactly what you're talking about. Nothing special, just a pretty average middle class family, a holiday a year, nice food, nice house, nothing grand, a decent car, but just the average life that most English people live, right? But why is that like the worst demographic? We, for some reason, are the most asleep and complacent, unimaginative, dull demographic, I gotta say. Now, I do outreach. I go on the street and I hand leaflets to people and I talk to them about what's happening. If I go to a council estate in Sydenham, I went to one not long ago, in South London, everyone's willing to have a chat. Yeah, we understand. And it's like, you go to somewhere like, I don't know, Hampstead, North London, and you go and speak to people there. That's a tough demographic.
Find exactly the same thing.
But it's so interesting. But that's the demographic we need to go for, because there's no point preaching to the converted. I absolutely find that exhausting. I'm not interested in speaking to people who already understand the issue. I'm not interested in trying to encourage them to speak out, because they're probably pretty willing to do that. I'm interested in waking up the general public. Yep. That's actually useful, and that's what I'm aiming to do on social media through my campaigning, and soon you'll see some kind of cooler projects which are coming forward. So yeah, there is, whether I would call it a class divide, I'm not sure whether I go down that route, but I would say is the middle class, the majority of the population are, as I said, pretty useless and complacent and have a lack of passion and a lack of colour. Yeah, asleep is the word, isn't it? It is.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier about Agenda 2030. Now, obviously, one thing that, whether you're awake, asleep, whatever you want to call it, you know that people are not happy with the Labour government.
Yeah.
People aren't happy with a number of decisions they've made. We've got billions to foreign climate aid. We've got the removal of the winter fuel payments. Now half of the pension credit applications have been rejected after promising that would work out for weeks on end. So many freebie scandals and all the rest of it, all these Taylor Swift tickets.
Yep.
What do you think that there is any redemption in the Labour Party whatsoever, or do you think that even those that we would consider asleep are done with the Labour Party and ready to have them scrapped?
I like that question. It's a good question. I mean, when the general election was happening, I went on Talk TV and I discussed this, the point about, it was the debate, Keir Starmer or, the Conservative Party, Rishi Sunak, whatever. And I was trying to just, on Talk TV, which is something of maybe a more mainstream platform, try and discuss the idea of how politics is being easily influenced and hijacked. And you mentioned Agenda 2030, right? So Agenda 2030, the World Economic Forum, the United Nations, NATO, the World Health Organization. These are all institutions that were not democratically voted in, which somehow have some weird influence on our politics. We voted Brexit, great, that did a lot, didn't it? We've actually got more influence from the EU now, from what I can tell. We seem to just kind of copy and paste their ideas into our laws and our ideas. So do I think there's any redemption involved in the Labour government? Do I think that the people who are asleep dislike the Labour government? Well, yeah. Yeah, but it makes no odds. I mean, if correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's like 20% voted for Starmer, right? So we know that the voting system in the UK needs some sort of reformation, needs a change. We need proportional representation, etc. But who cares? I mean, this is my grander point. It's like talking and bickering about surface politics with people. It's like, okay, so recently there was a petition which got thousands and thousands or even millions. All right, the petition that everyone was going on about, sign the petition, and that people emailing me saying, promote this. Why? What are you going to vote for? Okay, so Keir Starmer gets out, and then who are you going to vote for?
Who will replace them?
Another. Someone could say just another WEF puppet. No, someone else who is being influenced by the World Economic Forum. And this is what I said back when the general election took place. And this is my point. We need to go to the root of the problem. That's what we need to be attacking. That's what we need to be raising awareness about. And of course, people are going to be unhappy. Agenda 2030 and the ideas that are backing are utterly miserable. You're talking about an agenda which all looks pretty, but is going to strip you of your civil liberties, ramp up surveillance, take away democratic process, and more importantly, later on down the line, you'll own nothing and be happy, is a really lovely quote from the World Economic Forum, which a lot of people are familiar with. And then you've got the United Nations, the World Health Organization's pandemic treaty, which didn't go ahead, but they just slipped it in a different way. It's like, there's only so much talking we can do. There's only so much bickering we can do about left versus right, Keir Starmer, who's unhappy with the Conservative Party, or should we vote reform? Maybe. Great. I do think there's a place for mainstream politics, but that needs to be coupled with a much bigger picture, which people are very afraid to talk about. And when I see a politician come forward and actually discuss these this greater agenda and these ideas, then I will give them a round of applause. And we've had one I think, which is bridging, and he's touched on these ideas. And then from that point, I'm waiting. I am waiting, and I'm excited, but I'm also nervous, and we'll see.
So if there's no specific political parties that are on the rise that you would necessarily vote for if there was an election tomorrow, where do you see all of this going?
Oh, I think we're on the fall of Rome part 2. I think that's what we're on, and we're becoming complacent. We have bread, we have circuses, we have distraction. It's like, this may sound really pessimistic, and I know the person who I was with when I was celebrating New Year's last year just kind of thought I was being a miserable git. But I was looking at all these people jumping up and down saying, Happy New Year! And I was going, yeah, it's not though, is it? It's like we are now heading even closer towards Agenda 2030, and which is being constantly sped up, especially in the UK. And where do I think we're heading? We need it to head in that direction, though. That's the thing. And I've touched on this earlier about the demonstrations. It's like we need a level of severity to get people to switch on. And unless people feel directly threatened, like with lockdown, like with the masks, like with the jab, unless people feel that there's an element of fear to be had, then people aren't going to act. Now, every single time something happens, like the assisted dying bill recently, which maybe we differ on that. I understand that even in our network, there's some like issue, there's lots of complications and back and forth, but who cares? It's just called debate. Brilliant, let's have it. But my point is, my perspective on that, it's not a case of I believe that, because personally I'm against the assisted dying bill, but I'm coming at it potentially from two perspectives, maybe a Christian perspective and also a perspective of a moral perspective, a more of an earthly moral perspective. But I can still see the other side. I still understand what they're saying, but I don't believe that was debated in a rational, well thought out way. I think everyone can pretty much agree that was not something that was there was not much public consultation, not much informed consent, which we keep seeing more and more of. And the reason I mention this is it's like, I thought, another opportunity for the public to be like, hang on a minute, but still no. So I feel like we really need something else to happen here. And you mentioned like net zero, climate change within education. It's like mad to think that I was even writing essays about climate change.
Defiance Records brings the best music from the freedom movement. From Ramise's Never Give Up and Mad Mix's You're So Right, available as a double A-side on Defiance, to Raw Milk Conspiracy bringing back purpose to music with their latest single This Is England 2024 and their brilliant debut Misinformation Whore, available on Defiance Records.
Well, I'm still doing a environmental study course from home, doing it alongside this with the Open Uni. So I'm seeing firsthand the kind of woke ideology they're trying to teach me. They're trying to tell me that climate change is all due to racism and colonialism, and I'm pretty sure they want me to do a whole essay on why racism is still prevalent today. And it's just like, what's this got to do with...
Well,
I signed up for environmental studies. University
was a good, very short-lived part of my life. I talk extensively about school, lockdown, college. I can go into more detail on college, like talking about, you mentioned how does that influence young people. Just madness what I was being taught in college, bearing in mind I went to an art college, so WPD, you've got that exciting, cutting-edge arts, kind of artistic / incredibly woke, virtue-seeking, overly political establishment. But then I went on to University Arts London. I went to London College of Communication. I do like to name and shame them now because I'm in a position where I got my money back, so I can. And they are the most abhorrent, obnoxious, and woke, I don't think serves as a good enough criticism of them. They are absolutely horrific. I went to university for 3 weeks. On my first day, I walked in to collect my lanyard. They said, put on a pronoun badge. I said, no. They're like, what do you mean no? And they went, we do have he, hims, And I was like, so you're saying I'm a he, him? So there's some, rational conversation here. And they're like, so you don't want a pronoun badge? I went, well, no, I don't need one. You just told me I'm a he, him. So you've contradicted your own ideology there. Anyway, so I didn't take that. That was strike one as far as they were concerned. They were confused because I think about it, everyone else has got their
I've
badge.
never understood that. It's like, if you can't tell that I'm a woman by looking at me, then I'm deeply offended. And since we live in a world where someone can get jailed for offending someone, I thought that would be all right. But no, it's only when the woke people get offended.
Of course, and I was surrounded by woke tards.
Yeah.
I mean, like completely. I had then, and this is the best bit. I had got given a piece of paper, and these were like the rules of the university. And it was like some normal ones, not things I really need to know about, like be nice. Well, yeah, I am, an adult now. I thought being nice was sort of on the cards, but okay. Thanks for letting me know. I will be nice now. And if I wanted to be horrible, this definitely stopped me. And then the other rules were things like check your privilege. That's my favorite. And it's like, if you are white or a man, you have an unspoken hierarchy that's not necessarily visible to everyone else, but someone who is black or mixed race may feel threatened by your presence. And you need to recognize that as a straight white man. And I'm like, what the? And then you've got the pronoun stuff, and then it's don't be ageist, sexist, homophobic, ableist, classist, blah, 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 blah. Rejected all of that. In fact, I took a photo of it and instantly put it up on my social media. And everyone in my uni found this. By about a week, no one wanted to talk to me. And after 2 weeks, I was like, right, I've got to make a decision here. And by the third week, I was like, I'm out, because this is insufferable in terms of like living conditions as well. I was in halls of residence. I had people actually outside my door in the corridor waiting for me to come out of my room just so they could attack me.
Seriously?
I couldn't go in my kitchen.
Did the university do anything about that?
No, they're aware.
Were they aware?
Oh, they were aware. Yeah, they were aware that I was getting death threats as well.
So it was just no duty of care.
No, I had people sending me knife emojis, saying we're coming for you. This is all going to be released at some point, and I've been holding back because after I got kicked out of uni, I had to go into survival mode, and I was living in London. I was at that point literally homeless. I had to work really hard. I was sleeping on sofas and getting my act together. But now I'm in a position where I can compile this in quite a uniform fashion, and it's going to be released at some point so people can actually see the madness. I got voice recordings of people calling me a racist because I'm white, and apparently I'm a fascist because I turned around and said I don't believe in lockdown. I'm the fascist. It's insanity. These people are actually unstable. And when I was in university and in my student halls, I literally had physical fights, people, all because I said a man is a man and a woman is a woman, essentially. That's the grassroots of my opinion that really provoked them. And it just goes to show, like, I wasn't provocative directly. I was provocative. You could say I was provocative. I take it back. I was provocative. But I'm allowed to be provocative because that's called freedom.
But these days, being provocative is just sharing your opinion.
It's effortless,
so I don't believe that is provocative. And also, I mean, I suppose, relating to the fact that we're a similar age, I usually say that we got out of school just in time, just off the cusp of it, before we got really super indoctrinated. But I often think that if I was 7 or 8 years old in this day and age, I do wonder what kind of adult I would grow up to be. And it really makes me feel for these kids. And then hearing all of this stuff that you've gone through at university, just for saying that you think a woman doesn't have a penis.
Yeah, I know.
It's just absolute insanity. And then you have the absolute hypocrisy of the left saying all of this in the name of inclusion and love and, we all just want peace and everything like that. And then acting like that to someone who has opposing views. Mm-hmm. Freedom is the freedom to express and the freedom to be offended.
Yes.
Do you agree with that?
But the only way that you can, look, I'm going to be honest, I'm just nicking this from Jordan Peterson, but it is very, very true that the only way you can progress, the only way you can think is through the risk of offending someone. It's like my generation is kind of, we're split as a generation, a little bit like we mentioned class earlier. It's like we have the people who are like us, which is like, not many. I think we can agree. And then we've got the people who are on the other end, who are like the Antifa, sort of like really extreme, equally as passionate as we are, but they translate it through moronic actions, violence, and just utter contempt.
Vandalism.
I'm trying to be a little bit conservative with my language, but yeah, they're idiots. And then you've got the middle class, if you like, but equivalent of our generation, which is the silent majority who refuse to have an opinion, terrified of speaking out because the repercussions are so great. And that is our generation in a nutshell. And that's the demographic we need to go for. That's who, it's basically a fight as on either end as who's going to inject our generation's minds. And I mean, my kids won't go into the education system. Like I just would never ever subject them to that. And the education system, as I said, is a weapon. It's a perfect weapon, because if you can get into young people's minds, you can morph the future of this country. It's the most power. Being in control of the education system is vastly powerful and needs to be nurtured and needs to be way more looked into and protected. But of course, that's not going to happen.
Well,
at least not anytime soon.
Yeah, I mean, my younger brother, he's autistic, and he didn't see colour. And then he went to school, and all of a sudden he'd come home and he'd had a whole lesson about race theory, and he'd come home telling me all about slavery. He was 6.
It's insane.
He was 6 years old.
It's insane, yeah.
With environmentalism, do you think that there is any hope for someone who is ultra woke if they actually learn? Because if you look at the science and you look at the environmental degradation for, I don't know, soy farming, and vegetation crops and things like that.
Look, it's a subjective question, isn't it? Because obviously I don't know. There's hundreds of these, thousands of these idiots out there, and I've spoken to many of them. But if they're not able to comprehend the idea that penis equals man, that's a bit of an issue. I think they're going to struggle with anything that goes a bit more complicated than that. And trying to get into the nitty gritty about climate change and or talking about kind of let's take like veganism, which I just think is a moronic suggestion, and for many reasons. But trying to explain to someone that if you're a vegan or even a vegetarian, you're responsible for killing more animals, you're responsible for doing more harm to the environment, more pesticides, and then the pesticides go into the water, and the fish ingest the pesticides, and then the birds eat the fish, and then the birds get pesticide poisoning, and then that's great, and then the birds aren't there to then eat the insects and stuff that are attacking the crops, and then suddenly you're screwed. And then suddenly Bill Gates says it doesn't matter because we've got lab grown meat, which he's now trying to push forward.
Genetically modified food.
It's very interesting. It's just like a cycle. It's like they're replacing the natural cycle of the world with some really screwed up man-made infrastructure.
Would you mind just giving us a bit of a rundown on kind of I suppose kind of Bill Gates in a nutshell?
Well, first of all, Bill Gates is a man that still takes a shit. Still is, well, some argue maybe not a human being, but I'm not going to get into that. Personally, I do think he's
allegedly.
A human being. Yeah. But he still goes to the toilet. He's still a human being. He's just a man who's been gifted too much power and got into certain positions at the right time and got persuaded by evil, essentially. And he buys up farmland in America more than anyone. Why? He has meetings with our Prime Minister, both the Conservative Prime Minister and now Labour Prime Minister. Why? He has mass influence on our politics. Why? He is pushing all sorts of agendas which seem to mimic the same agendas that are incredibly profitable from global organisations like the World Economic Forum. Why? And that's the question. Why? Now, I know why. I think I know why. I'm going to put the idea forward that I know why. And that's because, first of all, he is just a really sinister, I think, psychopathic character. I think that he's got too much interest in money and power. And I think that he has some really, really, really nefarious and concerning ideas about how he thinks humanity should move forward. And somebody hasn't stopped him yet. But we as people, we as a collective, we can resist his ideas and his concepts and the kind of things he's trying to introduce, the digitalization of this world. Of course, obviously, everyone must know, of course, he's involved in Microsoft, which is one of the largest, if not the largest, digital infrastructure out there. Has the power to do some terrible things, and with power comes great responsibility. And if you use badly, we're screwed. And we are heading in that direction.
obviously in everything he's involved with the vaccines.
And that's something I didn't even touch on. I don't,
if you want to go into that more.
His influence on the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has put so much funding into the World Health Organization, is obviously a massive supporter of vaccines which have killed people. And although I could not right now present you with any concrete paper, literally I could after this podcast, but I'm saying right now, but just for the sake of people who are viewing this, it is just concerning that a multi-billionaire has so much influence on something that he knows nothing about and is willing to put so much money into an industry which generates so much money. And the thing is, they cause problems and they solve the problems, especially obviously over in America. For example, statins. Dr. Seema Holtra has spoken about statins relentlessly, talking about how the statin industry could literally be reduced by almost like 80-90%. You could remove the amount of statins that we prescribe in this country because they cause a problem through poor diet. Simple as that.
Sorry, what? Just for anyone who might not know, what's a statin?
A statin is about your cholesterol, so it reduces your cholesterol, and people with kind of like high cholesterol can take a statin. It's told that it's explained in our country that cholesterol is caused by fat, and actually fat is good. For example, like natural fats like fat in milk, fat in butter, good quality butter. Whereas they tell everyone it's about sugar, don't eat sugar, right? And then also cut out fat when actually it's fat, which is very, very good for you. And I'm not going to go into the complexities of why that is. But my point is there's no debate there. That is what I'm trying to allude to, is that forget about whether I'm right or wrong, because it doesn't really matter. What's important is that there is a discussion and that the pharmaceutical industry is attacked in many regards and is taken to task on many different sinister money-making techniques. Bill Gates, however, is protecting them. Bill Gates can fund them, and Bill Gates is a mainstream media personality, if you like, at this point, who is able to defend that title and has too many fingers and too many pies.
Well, Big Pharma, I mean, has definitely been in some hot water since COVID and
they've been. Pfizer
vaccines.
is the most fined company ever. I mean, and that predates kind of lockdown and stuff, and that's just going up now. And they are, lockdown. What it is just exposed them even more. But even still, I don't know why the general public don't have any like passion for talking about it.
Well, I believe you can. This information is out there for anyone that wants to go and find it. I mean, I believe it. I think. I'll find it again after this, but I think it's actually on the World Health Organization's website. You can go and find the statistics for deaths and adverse effects from the COVID vaccine compared to all other vaccines in history.
Yeah.
And I think the one that I was looking at was the tuberculosis vaccine. Yeah. And the results that they had on that were from 1968. It was on a bar graph and it was about that. And then obviously the COVID vaccine was from 2020, so it was only about 2 years of results from the time that the graph was.
By the way, we're supposed to have like 8 to 10 years of testing for a vaccine.
It was about triple the number. It was insane.
Ideally, what I would say is that everybody should be taking some sort of action in terms of outreach. This is what I promote. I don't believe in protesting through the street on a megaphone. I think a lot of it is to do with fueling your own ego and just shouting around on a megaphone saying, we don't like Bill Gates. Yeah, okay, well, constructively do something then. Don't just complain about it. What I do is I give out really well made, I would like to say, and well-informed leaflets with good quality sources and stuff that I can provide to people to give them access to good quality science, balanced science and alternative science regarding the COVID jab, but also a multitude of other stuff. And that completely boycotts mainstream media because I'm giving it directly to them. And that's hard. That's a whole lot harder. But that's the message I try and promote. Now, realistically, I understand that trying to get people to do that on a mass scale is incredibly difficult and would take a whole lot of work. But that is how you do it. That is how you do it. We have to just ignore the mainstream media. Don't try and fight it.
Well, there is a shift going on between the two at the moment. A lot of mainstream media journalists are breaking away, mainly onto Substack. Substack is really blowing up at the moment. And they're breaking away into independent journalism, making their own YouTube channels. Andre Walker is a good example. Dan Wootton. Neil Oliver.
Yeah.
I suppose the main issue that we've got with other mainstream media platforms, like the really mainstream media like BBC, ITV, Sky News, Sly News, and all the rest of them, is they basically just accuse channels like these of sensationalism. Is that something that you have to consciously try and avoid when you're covering certain stories?
Yeah, well, talking about the World Economic Forum, the United Nations Agenda 2030, and talking about how the vaccine, in my opinion, there's a really strong argument to say that it was actually manufactured to cause harm. And that's coming from Dr. Mike Eden himself, has made it very clear that the ingredients inside that vaccine are so obviously wrong. Why are they in there? I can't think of any other motivation apart from that was deliberately made that way. So I think that saying that is like labels you as a cliche conspiracy theorist, whatever. I hate that term. It's a nonsense term. But what my actual aim is trying to professionalize and come across to the general public in a way which is digestible, understandable, and doesn't sound crazy, whilst also trying to express a message that no one else is really willing to talk about, even in alternative journalism to an extent, because it does run the risk of you looking like an idiot. That's a really, really tough thing to do. And you're absolutely right. Like it's kind of like you've got a choice. And I think Resistance GB does a really good job of this because one, you're interviewing people and in a really just giving them the platform to express themselves in whatever way they want. You're not necessarily adopting that as your political persona, but at least you're allowing people the space to discuss that. But less pulling away from journalism, from kind of just like social media personality or someone who just wants to not run doesn't want to run something like Resistance GB, which is an organization, but just wants to be a personality. Even still, like, yeah, that's a hard balance, a very, very hard balance. I struggle with it relentlessly. And it's like, you don't want to fall into the trap of self-censorship to try and protect your image and protect what it is you're trying to convey. But also, you want to make sure that you're getting through to the general public. It is really hard to do. And there is a problem with it because you've got people who are talking utter nonsense, who are not nuanced, who are making people maybe like us look like absolute idiots. And then you get into a complete conflict about how, I'm not going to go on to that point, my next point, but yeah, it is a problem, but it's not something that truth always comes out in the end. Truth will prevail, and the characters who are honest, the characters who are actually attempting to do right, and just I don't pay any attention to it. I don't pay any attention to people who want to accuse me of not pushing it far enough, or you're only scratching the surface, or you should be doing that. I don't pay any attention because in the end, the right kind of character will come through. And that's what I think is organically happening. Who cares? Just allow natural selection to take place through journalism or through media personalities, and eventually, in time, those characters that truly had good intent will come forward, and who are honest will come forward. Truth will always prevail. I'm not concerned about that.
It must be difficult because obviously when you're careful not to censor yourself, there's a lot of outside censorship as well. Obviously, I'm not sure where you stand on maybe perhaps controversial figures such as Tommy Robinson. A lot of people would consider him to be a political prisoner. Would you share that view? Yeah,
I mean, I've never been a big Tommy advocate, and I've, literally in all the podcasts I've done, all the conversations I've had, I've never actually answered a question about Tommy. I don't really speak about him publicly. It's not really my area. I think the whole immigration issue is actually just a symptom of something else. Yeah. I think that I don't think the immigration issue is the problem. It's a problem caused by the root of the problems, which is Agenda 2030, the Great Reset, etc. That's my belief. So I don't want to, adopt this idea that is the problem, because I don't necessarily think it is the problem. But nevertheless, it's easy to recognize. It's like, I can't believe I can't believe we are having this conversation because it's obvious. Why, it's so obvious. I don't have a roaring passion for Tommy, but as just an average guy with a brain, I can just turn around and go, yeah, no.
Because the thing is whether you like him or lump him, whether you agree with his views or not, it should be terrifying to everyone that someone has been arrested for the length of time that he's been in jail for posting a documentary. that he presented with what seemed to be, and this is just my personal opinion, what seemed to be rather credible evidence. Now, if that is now a crime, then even people, in my opinion, even people who disagree with him strongly should be worried, because if someone like that can get arrested, then who's to stop the police from arresting anyone with an opposing opinion just for putting those out?
Right, hate speech. It's the most subjective lot of nonsense, and I for example, I put a video out a while ago saying about Keir Starmer, and it was outside the COVID memorial, and he did very well on Twitter and had quite a big impact. And I said something like, "Keir Starmer, we're coming for you." Now, obviously, I don't mean Keir Starmer, we're coming for you, we're going to attack you, we're going to really, do something nasty. All I meant is the British people aren't happy and you will, have your comeuppance. But take that out of context, and I had people messaging me, the same people who I mentioned right at the beginning of this conversation, who were looking out for me, being like, you shouldn't have worded it that way because you've got to be very careful. But that's just ridiculous. And the fact that I even have to consider that I'm a very, very free, spontaneous talker. I can't bear reading off a script. I'm very anti-script. I think if you're going to be a good public speaker, if you want to go into politics, you should be able to read without a script, unless you're quoting direct statistics and stuff. I get that, but my goodness, you're supposed to be a public speaker. Get on with it. And the fact I have to, it's hard enough public speaking, but the fact I have to micromanage my words, and the fact that I have to be addicted to the fact that I could get myself actually criminalized and have a knock on the door from the police because I word things just in a way which
that's
has
the
no
whole
ill
point,
intent.
though, isn't
it's
it?
Utterly ridiculous.
It's to silence you, because they know that. I mean, a police officer might be looking at that post, and he will know. He'll know he's not really inciting violence. He just means this. He just means that. But if there's someone looking for an excuse to come and silence you or arrest you or whatever, then they can take that inch and run with it for a mile.
I know. As my public presence increases, and as for example, I don't mind publicly saying this, I live with my door unlocked. I'm in and out of my house. I don't care. Okay, I don't live in fear in any way. I don't, or I walk home through dodgy places. I just don't care, because I'm completely free. I refuse to have anyone intimidate me. But I've had people say to me, "You're just an idiot," because the more you grow as a public figure, and the more you are more controversial, you've got to watch yourself a bit more. Which is, I think, I still to this day, I'm like, I don't want to put that much energy into it. But it maybe I'm not self-appointing myself in any way, but maybe at some point I'm going to have to watch my back a little bit more. But it's not just the police, it's people too. It's Antifa. Resistance GB have dealt with Antifa, utter nut jobs. And I went to university with Antifa. I've had people attack me. I've had, as I said to you, death threats and stuff. It's a really, really concerning time. And all because we just believe in civil liberty, freedom, and just rational thoughts. It's mad, isn't it? It is absolutely mad, and it never ceases to shock me.
So I wanted to ask you a little bit about Together. Have you got anything coming up? What's your involvement with that? What do you guys do? Yeah,
so my involvement with Together is ever evolving. At the moment, I kind of, my main commitment is involving the youth, getting boots on the ground, getting young people involved in an organisation which is incredibly professional and is actually making an impact. Together is an organisation that lobbies. It's an organisation that does outreach. It's an organisation that does demonstrations. It's an organisation that talks to people, does interviews, is involved with alternative journalism. It's an organisation that's got its fingers in plenty of pies, but good pies, not Bill Gates's pies. And I think that needs to be supported and promoted. If you are a young person, you're under the age of 30, you can actually join Together for £1 for an entire year. That's literally all it costs, £1 for 1 year to just get involved in an organisation which is actually going to fight for your freedom and advocate for young people. And Together is just, it's an ever-evolving relationship, and I'm really excited for certain projects that we've got coming up, working together. Yeah, I mean, what more can I say? If people who don't know for people who don't know, Together was established back in like 2021. They stood against the vaccine mandates. That was the original Together declaration. And then after that, they're standing against net zero policies that directly attack people. They're standing against LTNs. They're standing against the removal of cash. They're standing against mass surveillance, ULEZ, congestion charge, authoritarianism. They are an organization that is possibly the most well-established or I would say is the most well-established organisation in the UK at the moment that's really fighting against the government. So yeah, support. That's what I'd say.
So other than that then, what have you got coming up personally? Like obviously we've got a lot of protests going on. Are there any specific ones that you're planning on covering?
Yeah, so demonstration wise, there's actually a farmers demo coming up, I think.
Another one.
I don't know how well promoted that is. I'm not sure. I need to get the detail on that and maybe attending that. Demonstration wise, I've done my fair share of running demos, but it does seem that the people are less interested in the World Economic Forum and that issue as they are compared to the farmer situation, which I understand why. As I've mentioned, there's not a severity yet. There needs to be more of a problem directly facing people for people to actually come out on the street. That is why I attended the farmers demo, because I felt that I wanted to influence a different kind of perspective, because once again it takes me back to when I was 16 being like, all of these things are happening, but why? And it's the same thing. It's like all the farmers are saying this is happening, and I'm asking, well, why do you actually think this is happening? And they're like, well, money, and I'm like, no, come on, just that? Really? You think they do something this moronic for just that? I'm like, no, there's something more. And they're willing to have that conversation. I hand out leaflets and so forth. So demonstrations are, we need to keep consistent with them. Of course, we've had attacks on demonstrations going back to 2020, trying to stop demonstrating. We've got the online harms bill coming up again in 2025. We're getting attacked online. So we need to be back on the streets more and more and more, directly demanding freedom in a very physical way, but also not just shouting on a megaphone or chanting, handing out leaflets, engaging with the general public and being relentless. It's exhausting, it's hard, it's not fun, but the alternative is giving up your civil liberties, giving up your freedom, and being completely enslaved.
If anyone wants to come and find your page or find your upcoming events or anything like that, where would they be able to find you?
So you've got X, Twitter, you've got Instagram. You can go to my Instagram, Montgomery.toms, and then my Twitter is just Montgomery Toms. You can also find me on Patreon if you do want to support me financially. I've got projects coming up that is evolving, so you'll see where that money is going. The money does not go into my pocket. It does not fund a lifestyle. It does not take me on nice holidays. The money actually just goes back into what I'm doing, prints more leaflets, prints more banners, and allows me to promote a message that no one else is willing to promote. And I am one of the few young people actually willing to kind of put that level of work in. And I hope that changes. I really hope that changes. I want more young people involved spreading this message. So yeah, if you want to support me, that'd be absolutely amazing. And if you just want to give me a follow or send me a message or got any ideas that you want to contribute, let's do it. Let's have a conversation. Let's get some things done, and let's wake people up and stop global authoritarianism and mass enslavement across the world. There you go.
Well, brilliant. Thank you so much for coming on.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For more exclusive behind-the-scenes content, please be sure to subscribe to our Patreon. It really helps us cover the cost of any live streams, events, protests, or anything that we do. You'll also be seeing any behind-the-scenes footage and anything that we might be doing with Defiance Records.
Resistance GB's new series, 1,000 Words, has me, portrait artist Jake Fern, talking to some of the key figures in the movement. Half my brain concentrating on having a conversation, and the other half on making a painting. Do I succeed at either? You be the judge.